I can also go round up some folks in the lab, let them know you're going to
do the talk.
Sure, that's fine too.
Maybe shut up.
Okay, great.
So I think there were a couple of things that we wanted to discuss first, at least discuss today, and that was David. You had some things about the module owner, right? Yeah. Then there was one for Satish. One had some questions about the multi-valued selectors, and I think then we can move on to Bob's talk. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. So David, did you want to go first?
Sure. And before I do the module owner thing, I'll start with the community acknowledgments. Just as a reminder, I think it's a good practice for us to be thanking people in the community on a regular basis. So for this week, I want to thank David Bainbridge, Brian Sullivan, and Mike McBride, who helped chair the ONOS mini summit last week, and that was very, very helpful. So thank you. If they're on the call, thank you to them. And again, if anybody wants to do community shout-outs, there's this community acknowledgments page on the wiki, so just feel free to add a note there. One other minor thing before getting into this other stuff, I have received nominations for the H release bird, and so be on the lookout. I'm going to send a link to the doodle poll in just a few minutes, so get your voting in early and often. So lastly, for the module owner topic that Tom brought up, we had some feedback from one of the Linux maintainers who works at the Linux Foundation. We asked him to review what we're doing with the module owner system and give us some advice for how to enhance it and make it better. And his feedback was that we should be explicit about expectations on review times for a patch. So, for example, set some sort of threshold and communicate that to both the people submitting the patch and the people doing the reviews, the module owners. And he didn't have a recommendation for a specific time frame. He just said we should establish one and be explicit about it. So I wanted to just kick off a discussion here with the group, and maybe it also, needs a wider discussion. We can move it to the mailing list too. But like, what do we think a reasonable expectation is to set for review times? I think I'd asked Brian and Thomas the question, and they had said, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 days per 1,000 lines of code.
Well, so I guess the original straw man was something like 3 days, which sounds kind of reasonable.
Yeah.
However, we often will get these massive code dumps that are multi-thousand line code dumps that obviously are going to take a little bit longer to kind of go through and process as they're more work. So I guess the question was, does it make sense to have sort of a sliding window and say that we kind of have a little bit more time that should be expected? And so yeah, the straw man was kind of like maybe 3 days per 1,000 lines of code. So if you have a patch that's 5,000 lines of code, 2 weeks is kind of an amount of time that you.
And it's time to a fast response.
Basically time that it can sit between responses. So
Yeah,
time to first response.
Not to resolution, but to some sort of response.
Yeah. The thing I'm trying to wrap my head around on is sort of the resolution process. I have the same problem in Mininet, which is that, I will respond almost immediately to a pull request and usually say, well, I don't like it. It's got a lot of serious problems. We can't merge it. But I don't want to totally kill it and just close it and say forget it.
Yeah.
Instead I want to pull them along so they'll do stuff. But usually I give my feedback and then I never hear from them again is what happens. And so the pull requests, they just sit there forever. And so what is the ONOS approach or the Mozilla approach or the Linux Foundation Linux approach that actually brings these things to resolution and that works the best? What do you think are best practices in this area?
Well, I can certainly share, and this might warrant a bigger discussion, so we can keep it short.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of analysis on this at Mozilla. We did a couple different community audits that involved a lot of data analysis, and we had a very, very clear finding that, to your point about people leaving, the window for response is actually shorter than 3 days. The window of response was 24 hours, and anything past that had a dramatic drop-off. So, and as I was sharing with Brian and Thomas earlier, that doesn't obligate us to give them a substantive response. Even saying thank you within 24 hours hooked people, right? They just didn't want to hear crickets. So I think it's a good best practice to respond within that 24-hour window, at least initially, to say thanks. And then I think once somebody knows you care, you can probably extend the window a little bit longer. But that having been said, I think a window, setting expectations that we're going to respond within 24 hours is probably too tight,
How are you receiving the
contribution than Mozilla?
Bugzilla, their bug tracker.
Okay, so you have a bug tracker around because saying saying thank you on Garrett kind of awkward.
Okay.
But it is, right? Like, you've got all this code, and all of a sudden some guys just saying thanks.
Yeah. I hear. Okay, I hear.
You know what I'm saying? Like it just looks awkward, right? Like we could, if we had a way of showing appreciation for the contribution in some other way than saying thank you.
Yeah.
But you could just add a comment, right? And no, you can, but it's like if you look at Garrett and the way it's structured, like some guy replying and saying, thank you, post, and it comes down as like as another line at the bottom. It just looks weird.
Okay.
Well, so something that's worked fairly well in GitHub-based projects is it's more of like a chat-based conversation than just lines at the bottom.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So like in Bugzilla, it's also comments at the bottom.
Yeah.
Here, as comments at the bottom. Here it's like a weird kind of line that looks like a patch to that.
Can we do it a little bit more professionally? Like, okay, I like this contribution. I don't
You should have him record it saying thank you with a nice accent.
No, like, okay, I appreciate your contribution. I don't have time to do it right now. I will give you an update in 3 days.
Yeah. You could say, that's a good idea. Thank you for this. Our policy is to respond.
Even without thank you.
You have an automated
auto reply that's
based on
based on
to make it appear like randomized delay. Contribution. We will be looking into it. Someone from our staff will contact you within 24 hours.
We could, I guess.
So, no, but in all seriousness, I think I agree that like responding quicker
It's a good thing.
is a good thing. Definitely a very good thing.
Especially for the first time.
Yeah.
the first patch they ever
Matters.
upload to Garrett.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's hard for us to tell who's the first patch.
Well,
if I look at someone's name, I don't know.
No, but
Someone who submitted it.
programmatically we can figure out.
Programmatically, I'm just saying, like, you're going to write another.
Can we put it a tag that only us?
Like all alarms go off. First time committer,
Maybe we should put a disco ball in the office.
But no, I think it's a good idea. It's just the way in which we do
I hear
it.
that.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
And you're right. Different tools maybe are more easy to kind of work that thank you in.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's an offline item. Like, figure out the best way to do this in Garrett.
Yeah.
Because I agree completely. Like in GitHub, I can do that easily. I can say, oh, thanks, cool, and I can do that immediately.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't solve the problem of, immediate response, then comment on the patch, and then no response at all from the original submitter. But at least
Sure.
But that is interesting. I don't know. I guess an interesting set of data, which is that the acts, as far as you can tell with Mozilla, really mattered a lot.
Yeah, and all that data is available. That audit stuff was public, so if you're curious to dig into it. But
Yeah, it's interesting.
and there are other reasons why people might not respond, which is a separate topic as well. But that having been said,
Also, setting a threshold, a precise time, it also depends on what the people that has to respond is up to. Like before an S, it's obvious that nobody will respond. So fixing a threshold independently of the timing, when the review comes in, it's kind of...
So where this is generally going is we want to be able to identify areas of the code base that are not getting code reviewed quickly, or not getting as much attention as they deserve. And so if we can identify those areas of the code base, we can work on finding additional members of the community that might be good candidates for helping us maintain those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, sure, right before ONS there might be a bigger delay, or if you're on vacation there might be a bigger delay, but if it becomes a trend, then it means that, hey, maybe we need some help in this area.
Yes, and also maybe you put
two or three people, have a team of people.
Exactly. And that having been said, doesn't have to be a substantive response. You could just say, hey, ONS is coming up. I'll get back to it afterwards, too. So rethinking what kind of a response.
How hard is it to plot this thing? Like, how much time?
Well, that's what we're going to try to do.
Yeah, that should be doable, right?
Yeah.
And sort of, slice it by whoever module owner.
It's a fairly quick query on the database to figure out where a patch, like all the open patch sets, figure out when the last activity on the patch set was, and then if the last activity was a comment from someone, like a reviewer, then you could say the ball's in the coder's court. And if the last thing was a new patch set with no replies, then it's sort of an outstanding.
You know, like the big screen we have in the office.
It's another chart.
More useful to show that than our like burn up.
The longest weighted, the patches with the longest.
Yeah, exactly. On top of the one with the longest waiting time.
Boarding signal,
Actually, you could also, I mean, looking at Garrett, I don't know if it's, it might be possible to have a, I don't know if Garrett can do a view where you can sort patches by date or something like that. Might be interesting right now, so you can see the oldest,
Well, it sorts them by default by update time.
By updating.
So that's the last activity.
Last activity. Oh, okay, last activity. So that is the default sort. But I was also thinking of like submitted time, like I'm thinking for a timed resolution.
Which we may also want to try.
Yeah, and also there's this interesting question of what do you do with real stale old patches that might have a future, so you don't want to kill them, but it doesn't look like they have a future anytime soon.
I think there's two things here. There's patches that are like long-lived and not for submission, that should be not submitted as for review, but should be submitted as drafts. It looks ugly when you have a commit message that's pre-penned with "do not merge."
Oh yeah.
Why did you give it to Garrett? Why did you
see that
Garrett no one merge?
The purpose is, well, it's pretty clear, right? Garrett's a code review system, so it's working in progress and you want feedback on it, right?
Use the draft function. And add reviewers. And don't.
But the thing is, you may not necessarily know who the right reviewers to add for a given patch set are. So if you're someone that wants to come along, it's your first commit to the community, and you want to get some feedback.
Yes, I don't think that someone is going to come along first commit and say do not merge. First commit and say, by the way, I'm just going to come and hang out for a bit and get you to review my code, but don't ever merge it. No. I mean, like the guy's going to come merge it. We're going to go through a code review process. It's going to take the time it takes, and it'll get merged at some point. We use the do not merge as like this is something that's useful for now, or it's a bunch of hacks that are made for ONS. Don't merge them. That's even worse. It's a bunch of hacks for ONS, and they're publicly viewable. That's awful, right?
Well, is that awful? I mean, often it's nice to have your work in progress visible, and to have people be able to comment on it. So one workflow that's sometimes used, it's actually not infrequently used on GitHub, is when the moment you start working on a feature and you have anything, you just create a pull request, right? And then there's this ongoing dialogue. You keep revising it, and it gets better and better until eventually you're like, okay, yeah, it's good to merge, and then it sort of graduates. And that's sort of nice for two reasons. One is you get feedback early on the design and implementation before you've gone off in a terribly wrong direction, and so you can avoid wasting work. Two is that you can sort of help people get better and better and sort of learn from your expertise. And I guess three is that you avoid duplicating effort. So if somebody else is working on the same feature, they can look at your code and say, oh, wait, you're working on the same feature and you're way ahead of me. Or you're way behind it. I'm working on this already, so maybe I should submit a pull request. Maybe I should submit a request and we should merge these two together. So there's definite advantages to sort of the working in public, you might say.
Garrett,
at least on the GitHub, on GitHub can't speak to Garrett quite as well.
On GitHub it works fine through pull request. Garrett patch sets are a little complicated.
That is the view of lots of stuff. Like if you're a reviewer trying to look at what should I be reviewing.
Right, it adds noise to the signal.
And it's also like the longer you have a patch set pending, the chances are like it getting more and more defunct.
Well, that's sort of the same with pull requests.
But it's easier to merge because you're doing a merge and not a rebase.
Yeah.
So it's a little.
Well, the idea though with Garrett is one patch, one change. So if your change or your big change is one thing, a rebase is just the same as a merge. Rebases get hairy when you have a whole bunch of stuff stacked up together.
Well, that's what ends up happening. If you have a thing that's open, you're gonna keep on.
Yeah.
In some way, it's good because you accumulate the commit message, and the commit message becomes very descriptive in some ways. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I just
When you-
don't know if Garrett is the right tool.
Yeah, it sounds
If
like
you have
smart
if you have a
thought.
team that are collaborating on a pull request, it's easier to do in the pull request model
Yeah.
because you can work together on a branch, and that branch is compared against the target.
Yeah.
Whereas with Garrett, it's difficult to have multiple people collaborate on the same patch.
It gets really annoying.
Well, to go back to the original question, it sounds like nobody objects to being explicit about having some sort of review time, and nobody seemed to object or reject the idea of 3 days. In fact, we were kind of almost talking about, is that aggressive enough?
I think so. Because I found a commit.
For
on
the
OpenStack.
stack,
On
yes.
OpenStack, the first committer gets a thank you message. First
And
time
also they explain now will be the
Perfect.
process.
Yeah, which I think is the best
So
practice.
that we should probably pull in somehow. But yeah, I think 3 days is it's okay.
Would you argue?
Three working days?
Yeah, I mean 3 days is the upper bound, I would say.
Yeah, we don't want it to go beyond that. Ideally, it's early, quicker than that.
Yeah, I would say.
Thank you for your
faster
first
is better.
contribution to this.
What would be 2 days?
Yeah, 2 days.
How do we make sure someone does it?
Well, it has to. That's what I'm saying. That's what we need.
That should be automated.
We need a.
But then it's meaningless.
Yeah, exactly. It's not perfect.
Why?
Because no one's seen it. You haven't.
No, automated as in the sense that like it's
Oh,
like
tells
you
you
have a like, it colors the patch sets or something, right? They're colored by age or like
So
the reviewer
Yeah.
the reviewer list gets repinged. Like, hey, this is still waiting. You know, every 8 hours.
Sounds good.
Unless someone gets a feature on the you.
That's what I thought. I really want to.
You're a module owner, you best enter your record number. And then if you're like, not doing it.
I think like displaying it on the whiteboard on the screen here would be good stuff.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
having an interface for seeing what the incoming patch sets that are still waiting.
Yeah.
Garrett gives you that like an incoming list, at least for that's relevant to you.
That you're assigned.
Yeah. But,
So I don't know, Thomas, do you have any thoughts on the discussion? Like, does 2 days sound better than 3 days, or?
Exactly.
Did we lose him?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, for 2 days. I mean, 2 days is perfectly fine by me. And I completely agree with the rationale that better to be more responsive in the beginning. It's fine.
All right, and to be clear, that's 2 business days, so it's not like there's a weekend issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fail the goal, and we realize where the gaps are.
All right. So 2 business days per 1,000.
Yep.
although I don't know. I mean, do we need the metric of per 1,000 lines of code? Because you can review the first 1,000 lines of code within 2 days. You just don't have to be done, right? Like, this is
Well,
not
sure,
that-
you're not giving a
This is
resolution.
just for an app, right?
Oh, so I guess if we're talking about having some ACK or some comments,
Yeah.
then 2 days sounds reasonable.
just 2 days.
Have some feedback in 2 days.
Regardless of the size.
Yeah, we're not talking.
We're not-
We're
we're not
talking
gonna-
about resolution.
We're not going to enforce that programmatically. That like after 2 days the thing implodes and like your CD-ROM spits at you and like
Oh, have you had
CD-ROMs and
you know anything that is
That feature was removed.
Especially if you have the.
just gets deleted automatically.
I mean, that's perfectly fine by me. I mean, the original rationale for making it a function of the size of the review was, I guess, twofold. One is to be able to, if you have something that's a large blob of code, it may take a while to wrap your head around it, right? Because initially, all you may be able to do is comment on the cosmetic quality of it, but let's say that you might not, in order to just dissect it and figure out structure of the code, you might not be able to comment on anything. So that and also the second aspect was to sort of discourage the large dumps of code. But they will happen because of the way things are working sometimes. So I'm perfectly okay dropping the function of time. It was there mostly is just those 2 things, just to give us a little bit of leeway and as a form of discouragement.
All right, well, thanks for the discussion. That answers that.
Yes.
All right, so I think we can move on to the next point then, right?
Sure.
So Satish, I'm gonna give the floor to you. You had some questions or a proposal for modifying the flow rule abstraction.
It seems like my invite fell on deaf ear.
Oh, that's you.
I can't.
All right, I'm gonna mark you to present to everybody because I see that you're sharing stuff. Is that all right?
Still can't hear you, Satish.
Share your screen.
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
I was going to make you present to everyone, but he's already done that for you.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's very nice to have face-to-face discussion this time, and on the same time zone as well. Okay. Not 4 in the morning. Yeah. Okay, and yeah, this is related to the BGP flow spec, which is similar to the open flows. Like basically, we want to use the same as same flow module, which is existing for the open flow, and we don't want to duplicate that, and we want to use the same thing to push the BGP flows as well to the network devices. So this has been designed by team members Tejas and Shashi. So I'm just presenting in favor of them, and yeah. So the current issue with going with the current flow module, what we see is like in the current flow rule module, we don't have option to set the same type. Like you can set only of one type in your route, and we cannot have multiple type of same type. For example, if you see the protocols, we want to set like both TCP or UDP, or we have something called ranges in BGP drafts, like which says about the port, maybe it's greater than 100 and less than 1000. So this we can achieve it by pushing like thousands of flows into it. Again, it's going to be creating congestion in the network. The control flows is going to be more, like if you don't support the logical operations. Okay, so that's the issues which we face with the current flow manager. So we are thinking about like these are some of the things which I identified, like where we have some logical operations as well as multiple types to be used.
Are you using flow rules or flow objectives?
Flow objectives.
So you can.
Yes, that's
You
what.
can express that in flow objectives.
But in turn, it.
You can.
Yeah, actually, I would.
Filtering
Not a single file.
Huh?
Not a single file.
In filtering, you can. Yeah. It's a set of criteria.
You can define a range of ports,
A range of ports.
like in that case.
Yeah.
I mean, no. I mean, I guess you can't define the port criterion takes one port. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't take a range of ports. That's true. But you can define a set of criterion, right, which allow you to specify TCP, UDP, and so on and so on and so on. Right? Like you could say, like for IP proto, you could put several IP proto criterion in your set of criteria, which allow you to say TCP, UDP, and express that kind of your driver. I guess your device is your device that you're speaking to supports these logical operators. Therefore, your driver can take these filtering objectives and convert them into the right Boolean expression because it knows the context.
So
Yes.
what does this have to do with BGP? And isn't this just a flow objective or flow spec or something?
Yeah, okay. Just explain you about the what is the reason why we are supporting this BGP flow spec. Like if you see generally in the network, like it's been bound for the DDoS attack, right? So like we have some orchestrator which monitors this attack and it wants to push some rules like on dynamically. So based on the identification, it want to block some of the IPs or block some of the ports which where the attack is happening. So that's one of the use cases, like where we will be using this BGP flow spec where the devices are running on BGP. Okay. And with respect to flow objective, like I want to understand, like with a single flow objective can support multiple types in it.
Like when I see the flow rule, it doesn't take more than one of same type. Like
the flow rules don't. Right.
But flow objective again in turn will be converted to flow rules by the driver and again pushed as like.
Yeah, so the flow rule will never be able to. The flow rule is pretty tight to I mean, especially if you it depends really on your provider at the end, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You could imagine an open flow, an extended open flow switch which supports port ranges, for example. Or you could also imagine implementing it as a port group. That's another way that can be done with OpenFlow, right?
Yeah,
so I think the idea. So it sounds like the idea of extending an existing abstraction in the Java API is a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, couple of solutions we have, like one is like, as Bob said, like we can extend it. So in case of extending, again we need to extend the core module of the flow rule manager. So we thought, okay, instead of extending it, the alternate solution is like use the existing pipeline mechanism using the flow objective, where we can use the go to the next table like that, like keep moving on, so that here we can define the range. Like for example, I'll just mention here, okay, something like this. So this is the table one. In the table one, we have the selector, something like, for example, if you take protocols, we have TCP, and type as import port is 179. So here we can have some extensions like logical operators like greater than or equal to or something like that. This is one of the things. Maybe may not be exactly like this. Maybe we can have some enums like this to define it, and maybe the
yeah. You could do that, but then your selector.
Yeah.
The order in which you specify your selector becomes important.
Yes, you're correct. So this is just a high-level idea. Like maybe we can fine-tune it going further.
Yeah. Well, you said it can. I mean, this is closer to implementation than abstraction. I mean,
yes.
So it could be obviously the same abstraction could be implemented in lots of different ways, right? So, and sometimes the user shouldn't really care about this. Maybe you care about it because you're writing driver at the bottom, but.
Okay, and this way, like from table 1 to table 2, where we can push the next range, like maybe this is less than the whatever the range which we want. So by this, like when it comes to the provider, we will know that when we have this, since we don't have multiple tables with respect to BGP, so what we all have is a single table, what we understand. But when it comes to that, based on the go to next table the instructions, so we can wait till all the table informations which we get, and there we can merge all these things together, and we can form the single message, BGP message, which we want and push to the network. So this is one of the solution which we thought, like without touching the core part of it, just to handling the driver and extensions. So like if you guys feel like we can extend the core as well, like maybe in future OpenFlow might support the range and multi-values. If you guys feel that is reasonable, then we can extend the core as well.
Yeah, I think that's one way of doing it. Another way would be port groups, right, which is something that already exists in OpenFlow. I mean, but I think it's fine to have it put it into an OpenFlow style flow rule thing. I mean, I think the whole idea of extending flow rules to handle extended OpenFlow switches and customized switches that might be P4 switches or whatever is probably a reasonable way to proceed. And also the idea of being able to program, whatever these devices are, using the same abstractions that we program our OpenFlow switches seems like a sensible idea.
I mean, there's also the opportunity to, when there's these programmable devices coming out, right, like P4 devices, POF devices, and other protocols to think about. When we first designed the treatments and selectors, we decoupled them from OpenFlow, but mapped them to OpenFlow pretty closely, right? Like their semantics are pretty close to each other, right? And so maybe this is an opportunity to take a step back and actually think, like, what is a better abstraction? What is a better way to express what you want to do down to the data plane at a higher level, or
device level?
Yeah, I mean, it would be device level, obviously, because you're talking about a device right here. But
I think it's the flow objective abstraction and not the flow rule abstraction.
Yeah, agreed. But I mean, one of the issues is that flow objectives also reuse parts of flow rules to define themselves, right? So, for example, the forwarding objective uses a traffic selector.
Yeah.
Right? That might be a problem in itself.
Yeah, but I think thinking about how do you extend those abstractions, extend the traffic selector to do additional selection. I mean,
so we have the ability to define extensible extensions to selector, extensions to actions, to treatments. Whether that's enough is unclear.
Well, I also like the idea of making traffic selectors more powerful in useful ways, like being able to select multiple protocols and things that aren't necessarily one-to-one open flow. They could be one-to-many mapping in OpenFlow.
Yeah,
or they might require additional machinery like workers. But I think
but we have to be careful there because that is like a sweeping change across something, right? So that means that the OpenFlow provider has to change. That means that the apps have to change. That means that a lot of things have to change.
Okay. I guess I don't know the specific implementation, but there's being able to specify things at a higher level and then have machinery that generates the data, that manages the data plane for that manages the programming for you automatically.
That's what we're doing, right?
Sounds like a really good thing, right?
Right. But that machinery takes a certain input. If that input changes, then the machinery has to change. Right?
Yeah. But the thing I like about this is the idea that that the abstraction, that the Java API abstraction sort of works at a higher level.
Sure, I agree.
Or has the capability, basically extending it to make it more powerful. And the beautiful thing about programming languages is you can do things like loops. And so I really like the idea of being able to, and of course you can write a loop in Java as well. But considering that we're making, we're usually extending the data model rather than the method model. You can either extend the data model to specify ranges, or you can call it and call it in things like loops. I think having higher level operators, making functional programming sort of a powerful idea. So introducing higher level operators into your things like traffic selectors, simply like ands and or like logical operators and like comparisons and stuff like that. It's something that it's pretty clear that you can compile that into OpenFlow, and so it's nice to not have to do that manually.
I agree. The question is the introduction of such a feature, and what are the ramifications of such a feature to the rest of the system? They have to be careful about, right? Because we have people who are depending on ONOS to do whatever they're doing, right? And if you introduce such a radical change, right? Like this is an API level change, right? And it's probably the most used API across the entire system. That means that we have to be very careful how we introduce it. It might require, a significant, this is stupid, but it means that you have to change the major number and the version number.
Well, hopefully you can do it in a way that's still backward compatible with the existing API.
That's the thing, right? You have to be careful.
But in this case, for example, we can think, for example, for the case of port range, I don't think it's a matter of the flow objective itself, but in that case, you could specify, for example, a particular type of criterions. Right now, you have port criterions that allows you to specify only one port. You can have kind of like range port criterions. It takes two port range. Yeah, whatever it is.
Oh yeah. So you're saying the API.
And this is
API might
you're
saying that the best API might.
It's backward compatible, but it's also going further down the road of tying ourselves to this API that you've pointed out has issues, right? And now we're having another data point. Right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is a chance that actually stop, kind of think about it again, and think of a different abstraction. Maybe.
Yeah. That's a good point. Which is that sometimes that there's often a trade-off between maintaining backward compatibility and adding features to the API and making it wider, versus kind of refactoring it and breaking it but making it better. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I'm definitely not opposed to extending the abstraction, but like Ari says, we need to be very, very careful and deliberate to make sure that it doesn't break the existing application.
Satish, did you go through the table that you had of the extensions you require?
Okay. So again, what are the extension which I mentioned? Flow types. It's more specific to the protocol specific. So I think we know it. This can be in the driver part, the extendable type, extension type. So whatever is there as a bare minimum as a base, I think that we can see how can we extend it. So because these are all maybe the source address destination, this is fine. We have IPv4, but the ASN number is more specific to the specific network, or it's more specific to the protocol. I think this no need to have an extension in the core. Still, we can have it as part of a driver framework.
So I think ASN stuff will probably still be an extension of the core doesn't necessarily know about, but you can still put it in the selector.
So the bottom, at least it seems like well, there's a few, many of those could be extensions because, and actually those should be extensions because they're not they're more like key value type things, and they could just be extensions. But the other ones you had, where you had operators that you needed like ranges and stuff like that, that's different, right? That's a little bit
ranges and more semantics.
And what?
And an OR.
Yeah, that's logical and arithmetic.
But that's. I mean, it's good. It just opens the door to all kinds of like nice, like some guy like, I'm going to program a flow rule with like 25 logical operators. Fuck me.
Yeah, but that's what compilers are for, right? And
I agree, but then you have to define the compiler, right? So like it gets like, if you have a lot of Boolean operations, I mean, like it gets tricky, right? Like we say, oh, it's just an AND, it's just an OR, yeah, until it gets like insane, right? And then you need like a set solver to compile the flow rule, right?
And then your entire flow table is taken by one rule.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's a problem that's a resource limitation that people will have to live with.
Well, that's the problem. Like so, for example, in FlowVisor, right? Most people didn't quite understand how FlowVisor worked, right? So they would define their flow space and then push one rule, which would be expanded across their flow space. And their flow space was so ill-defined, let's say, or weirdly defined that it just like generated thousands of rules, right? And the flow table was full, and they were done, right? They couldn't do anything, right?
Yeah, but it's not really a user error. It's sort of a resource limitation problem. I mean,
yeah, but if you don't know about
they're
it.
specifying things correctly from the semantic point of view. It's just that the resources and the compiler weren't powerful enough to fit it on their existing hardware.
Sure. Yeah.
I can enter 999999999 factorial in my calculator, but it still overflows it.
It really should.
It should.
Fewer nines are.
Well, sorry, with the E99999, it's floating point doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyways.
That's it. I'm done with this. Like, this is the only issue which I want to discuss for this meeting. So, like, what will be the final, what we decided? Like,
good question.
Well, it sounds to me like we've identified a couple of areas that are good for extensions.
Yeah.
And as far as the range-based stuff, it seems like there's still some contention, and potentially this is an opportunity to put together a strong code-based proposal, kind of try it out, and if we wanted to do another.
But also, how many of those things have you tried to implement as extensions? Like even port ranges, you could define as an extension.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just about anything you could define as an extension. There's no.
Well, there's sort of two extensions, right? There's.
I had an implementation where there was an extension that took a JSON block. Right? So the application puts in a JSON block and it comes out of the driver. It doesn't know anything, right? So
that's fine.
That also works.
Well, I mean, so that's the whole.
Kind of cheesy, but
that's the whole principle of an extension, right? Like you can't.
So the point I had was like some of these things like IP addresses and protocol node, all that kind of stuff. saying that they could be fitted into the selector framework. Like, it's only because any of your logical holes or ranges or things like that that mean that it can't work right now.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe for like Boolean operations, maybe that's a different story. But to some extent, like, you know, one way you can look at this is define this as an extension, but if it's valuable, it gets promoted to a native tag.
But the extension is just a completely generic, bag and bits, right?
No, I understand, but what I'm saying is that like there's a way you talk to the extension and provision the extension and put stuff in it, right? And make it work the way you want it to work, right? If that abstraction is valuable, then it gets promoted as a type, right? As opposed to redesigning the framework to fit a feature that might be just specific to one use case. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? Kind of the same way that we say some apps are services, and if they're valuable, they'll be promoted to the core, whereas others will stay as apps. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking, and it could be interesting. I mean, I think the desire to have ONOS provide abstractions, at least like programmable abstractions, for any type of device across any type of field, across anything, right? Is a straw man. I mean, you're never gonna get it. Right? Like you have to admit at some point, like you just won't know what this thing is, and that's okay as long as it uses the right constructs that you can keep track of, and they will guarantee you your HA, your scale and stuff. So be it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
So go ahead, Mike.
You're up, Tom.
I'm trying to figure out if there's a set of concrete steps that we would suggest for Satish to take, or for the team to take.
I think, yeah. I think if you propose these things as extensions to be included in ONOS, right, as opposed to included in your app, but extensions are included into your app, and it's one way so that you can hit two birds with one stone, where like you can carry on doing your work, right, and proceed forward and implement, and then we can see the extensions as well, and we can decide this is actually a good thing, and we want to promote it somewhere else.
So, are you suggesting timing will proceed with this with the extension part? Maybe once you guys decide on whether to take logical operations or not, maybe later we can switch over to.
Yeah, because if we see that the logical operations, maybe we'll end up using your extensions, right? Because I mean, for us, I could just make, let's say, the open flow provider support the extension and interpret the extension and do the right thing. After a while, like, this is actually super useful. Let's promote it as a native tag. I don't know. What do you guys think? No.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. If you saw my proposal for the extension criterion refactoring, the idea is to actually put at the same level extensions with well-known criterion types, so that there's not anymore a distinction. I mean, the distinction now is between well-known ONOS criterion types and, let's say, experimental application-specific criterion types. And I completely agree. And in this case, I'm going to share also with you this idea code and document created about this refactoring. It would be very useful to have extensions and well-known criterion types on the same level. So promoting not official ONOS criterion types to well-known criterion types would be just easier.
Yeah.
But this model is definitely like that. Yeah. So like you work on something in your application, then this is promoted.
Yeah, because I think the issue is if you were to wait for us to implement logical operators in our selectors and stuff like that, you could end up waiting a long time, right? Right? Like it's so. This model allows you to move forward,
Okay.
well, and at the same time propose
Okay.
the new structure.
Sure. So here, two things are there. One is like logical operators, and also I'm using two tables here because current we have restriction of having the same type twice. So that's because of that. Like if my same type comes twice in the
I think you fixed that part. The fact that the selector doesn't allow none of the actions. No selectors.
Doesn't allow two extensions.
No, two extensions. Yeah, two extensions. It's different.
Yeah, two extensions.
Now there's no more extensions, right? So
No, there are
at
still.
what?
Did you blow extensions? No.
Yes, there's not anymore an extension type.
So much for that then.
But I thought you did have a use case where you wanted to have multiple criteria on the same character. Multiple of the same type of criteria.
No, well, my use case was having multiple extension types criteria in the same selector. Yeah, but from a flow real perspective, I don't think this will make any sense. Sorry, but like in this case, couldn't you just specify the IP protocol as a wildcard match? I'm not sure how your flow specification works.
Yeah, wildcard okay, but it becomes like for all generic, right? So for example, out of 5 I want only 2, then it becomes a problem. So this case maybe yes.
You know, the wildcard would look like it's IP proto is should have looked. But you can define you can define your extension and put multiple IP proto fields in there.
Okay.
Right.
That would be better.
Yeah.
So that way I can avoid multi-tables as well. I can have for multi-table in a single table.
That's if you want to have multi-table or not.
The only reason is like I don't want to have similar like again one more IP protocol like just to have multi-values.
But what you're saying is you're essentially going to define one extension, right? And that one extension is going to be a set of criteria,
Yes.
interconnected by logical operators.
Yes.
And that's all you need.
Yep.
Really. Right? So it's only one extension you're defining. Right? Now how you talk to that extension and how you deal with it, how you serialize it and deserialize it, that's up to you.
Okay.
Right? But it's your extension, and like I said, this will give us the opportunity to look at the structure of the thing and think about it a bit. Because I think we're all a bit. The reason why there's a bit of silence is because it's changing selectors and treatments.
Okay.
Is a scary thing.
Yeah.
It touches every part of the system. Right? Like everywhere in the system uses them. Right? So if you change them somewhere, right now it works for people to some extent. And if you change it, it's not something you can do in a spread. Right? It's something you have to be really careful of.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So I guess you know what to do, Satish. You can work with Tej to figure out how to approach this then.
Sure, Thomas.
All right, so given the fact that we are almost an hour in, we could overrun a little bit, but I think it probably would be best to postpone Bob's talk after all then to maybe next week. Is that all right, Bob, or how do you feel about that?
That's fine, yeah. I don't want to, I want to respect people's time and not go too long. And we probably put in enough brain power and time this afternoon anyway, so I'm happy to do next week.
Okay, so we'll schedule you for next week then. Is that all right for you?
Yeah, that's great. If you want me to start out next week, I'd be happy to also.
Perfect. No, I'll schedule a hangout, and then you just need to show up and give the talk, and we'll grill you afterwards. How's that?
That sounds great. Like I really look forward to it. It's a slightly different audience, TST versus ONS, and I think you all might have some interesting thoughts about certainly this is data plane SDN isn't coming to ONS immediately, but having it on the horizon, how we would think about it, and also how we might want to rethink what we're doing currently with NFV and how ONS relates to it. So I look forward to a productive and interesting discussion.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think we can call it a day, and then we'll see you all next week.
Bye.